Thank you everyone for coming today, and I know it's fairly early on a Saturday. We're going to have a brief presentation by Tom, or I guess an hour presentation by Tom, and then we look forward to... And Sandy. Looking forward to your thoughts and opinions or your feelings on the budget. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
So I'm actually going to go in front of Tom, so I can only see some of you, but again, thank you so much for being here. This is the second of our community forums. In this particular one, we will do some reiteration of what we did in the first community forum, and Tom and I will be going back and forth through the presentation with different notes that we have. And then there will be some new information as well regarding budget, revenues, expenditures, the tax impact, talking and then drilling right down into enrollment, because that is also a contributing factor for us at Eden. So not everything that we talk about has to do with what we are or not getting in terms of state aid. Much of what we're going to talk about has to do about enrollment as well. And then there'll be a Q&A afterwards for anybody who wants to speak. We will be holding those Q&A, those question periods to each of you for 2 minutes, just so we can get through everyone. Our timeline is to finish as near to noon as we can, understanding that we're starting a few minutes late, but I really appreciate your patience because we just came out of another meeting earlier this morning. What I'd also like to say, and I might actually, I'm not sure who else is here that might want to add on to this, because I only have a few pieces of information on it, but we have, as a district, organized for Wednesday night at 6:15 for some of the teachers, some of the administrators, some of the board will be out front with their own rally, and I know that you have seen some of that with other districts. Eden will be doing its own starting at 6:15 on Wednesday out front. I would tell you that that's also going on at the same time as a few other meetings, so if you see people during the budget advisory team meeting getting up and coming back, that's why. There should be a mic or so if in fact you want to speak about it out toward the front of the entrance of the district as well. The reason for that is, and Tom will have some discussion about that today, right? Or you could?
Sure.
Okay, he can. He always says yes, which is why I like him a lot, is of what the impact is. We covered it the last time, but what the impact to Eden is for the lack of state aid runs right now. And you'll see a little bit of that as we talk as to why that's causing us some reductions as well. So last year we spent an awful lot of time talking about the impact of the aid reductions for GEA. This year we're adding on those aid reductions from GEA, which continue, but also the lack of the state aid run, which is making it a little more complicated and a lot more complicated to actually give you some straight figures about where we're heading, because we just don't know how to compile anything because we haven't been given those formulas from state aid. But Tom will do a great job of explaining what he does know and the impact. So we're going to maybe 45 minutes for the presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, well, good morning. Welcome, everyone, on a Saturday morning. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. But I think it's great to see everyone here because we're all in this for the same reason, to have the best budget that we can for the kids for next year. So it's great to see so many people want to be here, want to hear about it. And actually, what I'm really impressed about are the number of students who are actually sitting here on the audience on a Saturday morning. So God love you for that. So welcome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about what we talked about at our first community forum. Not everybody was there at the first community forum, but I just want to set the stage a little bit about what we're kind of looking at, not only for the coming year, but how we've got to where we're at, and actually where we're at, and the impact that it actually has on each and every one of us. So what I want to do, and we actually brought our pointer for this one as well, is take a look at foundation aid. And before I actually get into explaining this chart, some of you have seen this before, but for those who have not, the bulk of state aid funding that the district receives is called foundation aid. And for foundation aid, we can use it for any purpose that we actually need to for the district bills. So as I said, it's the bulk of the state funding. But what we've actually seen is for foundation aid, which they brought in, well, basically 2007, 2008, and what the state said is, well, we don't have full funding to give you all of your state aid the way that you actually should have it. So what we're going to do is we're going to phase it in, and we're eventually going to get you whole as to what we think you should actually be receiving in state aid. So they show the formula, and they say, there it is, but you are not getting it. So what we've done is show you what we're getting and versus the full formula. So, for instance, well, okay, the red doesn't show up very well.
Do you want the light?
Well, I'll get up a point because the red's not showing it.
It's working now, Tom.
It's working now.
Just slam it on the desk.
Nope, it's not working. Okay. So anyway, this column right here, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. So this is actually what we've received from the state over the course of the years. So as you see, 2007 all the way to 2014-15, 6 million, or 6.5, 6.5, so on and so forth, to last year, $6.6 million. That's actually what we have received in state aid funding, or a total of $52 million over the course of those years. What the state said we should have actually given you, though, is this column over on the right. If we were able to fully afford our state bills, this is what you, the district, are actually entitled to, $69 million over the course of years. So as you can see from that slide, each year we've been short a couple million on the foundation aid for a total of about $17 million shortage on our state aid funding. That's just the foundation aid right there. So that's one piece of our deficit puzzle that we're actually looking at. So $17 million. Last year alone, $1.3 million deficit. So just graphically, that's the same thing that actually from the previous slide, just to say in the rust color, what we did receive, in the yellow color, what we actually should have received. And this also, we showed this last time as well, this is total state aid that we've received over the course of the years. One of the things I want to point out on this, if you take a look at 2008, 2009, we are actually receiving less state aid today than we did in 2008, 2009. That has a dramatic impact on what we're able to deliver service-wise. So state aid and the foundation.
Especially because we're almost at 50% in state aid.
Right, our funding, we received just over $11.5 million in state aid funding out of a $26 million budget. So it's significant, the amount of state aid that we actually do receive. So when you don't get your full share, it does have a definite impact on us. Foundation aid, though, is only one part of the formula. What we talked about last year, and almost every district unanimously last year talked about GEA. And I think I asked last time, and I'll ask the same question, who here has heard about what GEA is? Just a show of hands. Okay, so not all the students have heard about GEA. Okay, so GEA, it's called the Gap Elimination Adjustment. And basically what that is, the state had a gap, they had to eliminate it, so they adjusted our budgets. So that's how they got rid of their deficit, by giving us a bigger deficit, basically. So what they did is they've said every year, we, the state, are not able to afford our overall state bill, so what we're going to do is take a little bit from each district. And a little bit really wasn't a little bit, and you'll see in a second. So a little bit from each district, that'll help make up the state deficit, which it did.
For 3 years, though.
It was only supposed to be temporary. It started in 2010. It is still going on to this day. And what the state now has actually done is said, oh, well, you know what? We're in a better financial position than what we had anticipated for the past couple of years, so they are giving money back to districts. And what I've told people, and I will say this again, when they're giving money back to districts, they're not giving money back to districts in the gap elimination adjustment, they're just taking less away. So for instance, if you take a look in 14-15, initially the state said to balance the state's deficit, we are going to take away $1.25 million from Eden alone. Then again, near the end, they said, you know what, we're going to give money back. We're going to give an extra $229,000 to your district. Again, they didn't give us $229,000. In the end, they took just a little over $1 million away, under the guise they've given us more. So they still took $1 million from us. But if you take a look over the course of the year on the right-hand side, over the course of from 2010 on $7 million in gap elimination adjustment funding. So when you take a look, 7 million and then the 16 million, that's a sizable chunk that this district has not received. And that, quite honestly, when you add up the 1.3 million and the 1 million, that was our deficit last year. I mean, if you took a look at what our deficit was, it was really in response to not receiving the state aid. Had we received our full state aid as we should have, we would not have had a deficit last year. And basically, we are going to be seeing the same thing this year. And why are we going to see the same thing again this year? Well, there's something now, and you'll see in the fourth bullet, the governor's failure for the first time, and I'd like to read this because I think it's important to actually read. The governor's failure for the first time to release state aid calculations, he wants to tie it into the state plan to change APPR, means our revenue projections, first of all, are frozen from last year because we don't know any more about what our state aid is going to be for this year. And so as we prepare our budget, we have to look at what our revenues are going to be, and we have to project. And if they're frozen, then our projections are at best inaccurate projections. So we will say that right out front. We work with the information we have. The information we have from the state is not a complete set of information. Traditionally, what happens in the state budget is in January, the governor will release his budget. There will be school runs for every single district. That will be your worst case scenario. So you'll know at least at a bare minimum, here's the amount of state funding you're actually going to get. By March, the legislative branch takes a look at it and says, okay, you know, what are we able to restore? What more are we able to give back? And then you get your final state aid runs. And so, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
I don't want you going blind.
Look
You
at
can't
that.
afford a comp case.
There's a lot of paperwork to fill out for that too, you know.
It doesn't, yeah,
That's amazing.
Okay, so just,
right there.
There you
okay,
go.
thank you, sir.
It's on.
Yeah. Okay, so totals shortfall, $2.3 million. What we're looking at, that was our shortfall last year from the state. Again, since we have no state aid projections from the governor this year, until he ties in whatever initiatives he's looking to pass, we're looking at the exact same thing again. So, state aid frozen, $6.6 million. GEA, at this point, left intact of $1 million for a total of $2.3 million. So looking at that, that is our starting point with the state funding, again, for this coming year. So when we take a look at this, it has an impact on everyone in this room. Because again, our whole budget of $26 million is based on state funding, the tax levy, what taxpayers pay, and any other revenue sources that we actually receive. So if we don't know what state funding we're going to receive as a whole, it has an impact on the tax levy. I mean, we can only raise the tax levy so much, but still, it puts more pressure on all taxpayers here because we have to make up our budget somewhere else because we can't rely on any increases on state funding. And I don't say this as to blame anyone, it's just a reality of what we're dealing with as we're putting the budget together. So just looking at the overall picture on that. One of the things, and we did this last year as well, we would encourage everybody in this room to write, call, text, send a tweet to the governor, to the elected officials. I'm going to leave this up for a minute, so if anyone wants to write this down, this will be on our website after as well. On Monday, this will be on our website. And let them know. I will say last year, as a whole, districts really got it right. I think districts as a whole said GEA, and it was a very clear message from almost every single district. Please eliminate the GEA. And that's why we saw the restoration of $229,000. And that message really got to the elected officials, and it did put pressure on our state government to give something back. It didn't eliminate it. There's been talk as to how many years it will take to eliminate the GEA, but that message was a consistent message from every single school district. This year, the message is split. Last year, you heard me talk about GEA. In fact, in the presentation for Community Forum, I did, Rick Timms from across the state had a great presentation on GEA. We showed it here, and we spoke on GEA just like everyone else did. This year, you're hearing me talk about foundation aid, because every district now is talking about those two things, foundation aid and GEA. So the message, unfortunately, is not as clear for state representatives to hear, please take care of this one issue. If you take care of one thing for us this year, this is what we want, because now there are two. So now, it doesn't help us that we're going with two messages to state government. But the fact is, both have a dramatic impact on us. So, and there has been no consistent one voice this year. So it's just an extra challenge that we have this year in dealing with our elected individuals to say, when they say, which one do you want taken care of more? And it really is 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
So let me jump in for a moment on this one. On our website, which has been there for the past year, are the email addresses and the actual addresses for DiPietro and for Senator Gallivan. I have met with Senator Gallivan at least 3 times in the past year regarding this. He has the GEA as his #1 priority, and I would agree exactly with what Tom is saying, is every district with one voice last year, including when the superintendents and actually even people that are superintendents for building and grounds go to Albany to speak with our legislators about what we find to be issues at schools. There are schools across New York State, it's a big state with varying needs depending on where you are, that do have surpluses of money. The problem right now is that everybody's being treated pretty much exactly the same, and there are school districts that are in fiscal stress. This board in 2013 took a radical change, and Tom will show this later, as to how it's used its reserve funds. And some work was done prior to 2013 setting us up to be successful. We are not a district right now that's up in the news as one of the top 10 in fiscal stress, even though there are how many in Western New York?
There are 3 in the top 10.
3
There's
local school districts in what are considered either moderate or severe fiscal stress. So again, I say, and I've said this at other board meetings, I give this board a lot of credit for the way that it has handled its money, especially its reserves along the way, so that we are not in that situation. So you've done a really good job. However, having said that, if we are not smart with our money and we are not careful, by the year 2019, 2020, if nothing changes up at the state legislature, we will be in severe trouble doing what we're currently doing that's working. It just can't continue to do it for another 5 years. Write to your legislators, call your legislators. It's your own local community. We're not talking about any other community in the state of New York. We're talking about Eden and the impact on Eden. Having an impact of $23 million over the course of 7 years is hugely impactful to Eden. And so please look at our website. We know that last year we basically shut them down with our letters and our phone calls. We've been on this marathon as a school district for a year, and now we're just in the end of the marathon in a full-out sprint. I think that's the best way that I can put it. April 1 is the time frame for the state aid, for the state to give out its numbers. So we're only talking 2 more weeks.
If it passes on time.
If it passes on time, I agree.
And they've been very good over the last couple of years. I just don't know what's going to happen this year if we're going to see something on time. So, okay. So next, let's take a look and see where we've been over the past couple of years and where we're actually headed. You see, for the last couple of years, we have ended the years on surpluses. Not huge surpluses, but surpluses nonetheless. And the reason for that is, quite honestly, we have cut off spending very early. In fact, I was speaking to some of the administrators prior to my being here as to how early we have actually cut off spending, and it's gone as early as in some years as September. So, I mean, you're starting the school year in July 1. By September, they were cut off. And part of that reason why is if you're using some of your reserves, if you're not getting your state aid, you have no choice but to try and spend less than what you're budgeting. Because otherwise, you would deplete your reserves, and so you have to try and build them up. So, every administrator and every staff person has had to live with frozen budgets. September's a little early, quite honestly, so, but usually we freeze probably around December, quite honestly, and try and spend less than what we're actually budgeting just to help us out at the end of the year. And quite honestly, now that we're actually using more of our reserves as part of the budget process, it helps us in that too. So if we don't end the year with some money left over, it really hurts us at the end of the year. But
So explain the graph.
okay, so as I said, what you see kind of in the orangish color on the left side, these four here, is again how we've ended the year with a little bit of surplus. Again, not spending everything that we actually planned to spend. Our revenues are pretty static, so what we predict to bring in, we're pretty much bringing in. We're not getting an extra windfall of a couple $1 million from some unknown donor, which would be wonderful. Anyone wants to donate some money, feel free. We'll take it gladly. But that's really because of less expenditures than actually budgeted. Something I want to point out. It says we've ended the year in a surplus. I need to make very clear to everyone, we have been deficit spending for years. So every single year when we end in what we call a balanced budget, your revenues have to equal your expenditures, truly is deficit spending because we use fund balance and reserves. So we're using our savings. Again, it's just like saying at home, if you have a $2,000 budget, but you're using $200 every month out of your savings just to make that budget, you're deficit spending. It's no different. And anytime you're using your savings as part of your plan to move forward, that's deficit spending. So we're meeting what appears to be a balanced budget, but it is deficit spending. Here, actually, this is our deficit for this coming year, and then looking at expenditures moving forward, if nothing else changes, you'll see that the deficit's expected to grow to just under $5 million by the year 2019. And what we're talking with this in terms of spending is with contracts going up for salary increases, with healthcare going up every year, this is causing basically the gap of what you're actually seeing. Okay, our revenues for the most part are holding flat. Our expenses keep going up every year. So that, in a nutshell, is why you see the deficit actually grow. Make sense?
Perfect.
Okay. Our reserves. Here's what you're seeing up to this current year. So I'll show you here that our reserves hit a high of just over $8 million. Now, let me talk about the reserves for a second. And I think I've said this on many occasions to the board, but for the community as a whole, and I'm sure there are many people in the community who have heard this before. The reserves are basically our savings accounts, no different than your savings accounts at home. So if a rainy day happens and your car breaks down, and outside of your everyday monthly expenditures that you actually have, if you don't have a pot of money in your savings to take care of it, you can be in trouble. No different for a district. One thing I would actually say for the reserves for a district though, most of our reserves, most of them are actually restricted reserves. What do I mean by that?
This is a collection of all the reserves.
This is a collection of all of our reserves, absolutely. And about 98% of that are restricted reserves. So for instance, we have a reserve for employee retirement. So the retirement system, we actually pay into the retirement system, which I think everyone here knows. We have a reserve just for that. So if something happens to our budget and we are not able to make our bills, let's just say, we have this reserve to fall back on. And it say as part of the budget, and we have done for the past couple of years to say we're using part of our reserves to pay the ERS bill. That's all you can use it on. You can't say, oh, I want to take from the ERS reserve and pay for the lights. Wouldn't happen. You could only use it for its intended purpose. We have a reserve for sick and vacation time because the state says you are obligated to pay sick and vacation time. Well, so if you have money in that savings account for it, you can use it for that purpose and that purpose only. So we have actually for the past couple of years, we use a combination of that to balance our budget and to say, okay, well, part of the retirement bill we're going to pay out of the reserve. Part of the sick and vacation we're going to take out of that reserve. But again, that's all it can be used for. So I think that's important to note as well. The other thing to note on here as well, you will see the basically reverse this past year from what we've seen in 13-14. During the budget process last year, we increased our use of fund balance and reserves from $700,000 to $1.1 million. It was a little more than I was comfortable with, and you know that. I'm very conservative with that. We needed to do it to balance the budget, but what you did actually see as well, our reserves have actually gone down. Now, it would have gone down even if we had only used 7, but that trend of going up now is definitely reversed. And you want to use your savings accounts to balance your budget, absolutely, but you want to use them cautiously. If you take a look at this here, and what you're actually seeing right now is from 14-15 to 18-19. By the time 18-19 comes, we don't even have $3 million. And I will say this, $3 million sounds like it is a lot of money. I know it does. But when you're looking at a $26 million budget, it goes extremely quick. And when you're looking at a deficit literally this year of about, well, we started at about $2.7 million. If you took it from the reserve solely, your reserves would be gone within a matter, you know, right now we're under 7. It would be gone basically in 3 years. You would have no reserves. So you don't want to do that. You want to use them realistically as a portion. I won't go over where we're at right now. At the end of the year, if you end on the positive side, you try to put some back in your savings account. That's what we did last year. We use more than what we put back in, so which is why they're not as high. But when we ended the year, we tried putting some back in reserves. And I'll be back again in August saying again, hopefully we ended the year on the positive side, and here are the reserves that we can put some back into and build it up just a little bit. It won't be as high, unfortunately, but still, you want to keep your reserves at a healthy level so you don't get into that situation of being under 3.
So you could go to most any school district in the same situation as we are and see a graph from that is on a decline. That is by intent.
Whose intent?
I'm going to tell you. So approximately a year and a half ago, in public statements, the governor of the state of New York stated, and he continues to state, that New York State is one of the most expensive states funding education, and that his plan was to cut the number of school districts, which is approximately 670 school districts, in half. So the intent to cut districts in half, to consolidate, to close, to merge, is by intent. Most mergers in the state of New York that have been attempted in the past 4 years have failed. And there's good reasons why they have failed. There's very little tax incentive for school districts to merge. It's not as if you're going to save a lot of money by merging as a taxpayer. You lose your town's culture. So often I hear people say, I mean, I'll say it outright, why hasn't Eden merged with North Collins? Most likely, if Eden merged with North Collins, children would be on a school bus longer. North Collins may not use all its buildings. North Collins students may end up coming to Eden. Some Eden students may end up going to North Collins. And this is exactly the same nature of other mergers in other communities. And there has always been one district of the two that has said, no, that's not what we want. In order for those districts, about 670 districts in New York State, to be cut in half, there has to be some incentive to make that work. And since there hasn't been a good plan of incentivizing districts to merge, that's when you start to see some of the, I call them the tactics that you're seeing. Yes, it's good to get less taxes for our school taxes, a tax cap for districts, rebates for parents, incentivizing people not to go over the not to go over our own tax cap with a supermajority. But the end result is, Eden is a beautiful example of it. You probably see more fundraising, because if we're not getting the money somewhere else, we're going to get the money in order to run the programs that we want to run. The only thing that can change with how we're functioning right now is that Eden decides that it doesn't want to be the school district that it's been. It doesn't want to offer all the programs that it's been. And we may not have that choice if this trend continues for the next 4 or 5 years. Right now, we're right on the fence. And you'll start to see that as we start to talk about our own deficit of what we can and can't do. But by the time you get to 18-19, those are the school districts that are in moderate to severe fiscal stress right now, those that have $3 to $4 million in their reserves, because on a rainy day, they would not be able to function. And those are 3 or 4 of our local districts.
Oh,
that have used all their reserves or most of their reserves and are really, really shy.
Can you name one of the districts?
Sure.
I can actually, and not to
can
pick
name
on
them all.
any of our neighboring districts, but Frontier is a good example.
Niagara Wheatfield.
Niagara Wheatfield is #1 on the state for fiscal stress. Newport, West Seneca, larger districts. So what you're seeing when you took a look at their reserves, instead of going like this and then a slow decline, they would have gone like this. Now Frontier would be pretty darn close to about here right now. So I'm not saying they have less than $1 million, I'm not saying what it is, but I'm saying they're very low right now. So they don't have anything to fall back on. And we don't want to get in that same situation that those districts are actually seeing, because now you're seeing 10% increases in the tax levies in some of those districts. I mean, Niagara Wheatfield has gone out with 10%, and it hasn't gone well in that community, I can tell you that right now. But they have nothing else they can fall back on. So we don't want to get ourselves in that spot, so.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Okay, so now I want to turn it over to Sandy because, again, this isn't all necessarily budget. There are other factors that go into our programming, what we're looking at for the following year.
So a contributing factor to many districts in New York State, but I'm going to speak specifically to Eden, is a declining student enrollment. Now what's curious to me, but it may not necessarily be curious to many when you really start to think about it, is if you take a look at the population, the overall population growth in our neighboring townships that are within the Frontier Central School District, townships within Hamburg, so Hamburg, Boston. I can look at Eden itself as a township or a municipality, North Collins. There has been overall population growth. But we're not seeing that overall population growth coming into the schools. And so the question becomes, and it really is a question, is why not? If there's people moving into these townships, why aren't there students coming with them? So let's just start to think about what that means. It could be retired couples moving south of the city, south of the South Towns, although we do encompass some of the South Towns. It could be younger couples that are not having children yet, which we know is a trend. It could be couples that don't intend to have as many children, or can't afford to have children. It could be people that are moving back in with their parents, but not necessarily moving into their own homes. So we are seeing overall population growth in these areas, but we're not seeing the students come with it. So we can come away from that with two particular feelings. We're either going to see a student enrollment increase for Eden Central School District, because maybe those children aren't born yet, and if in fact that's what's causing it, then we're going to see a population increase at our younger grades first, or we're just not going to see one at all. And this is the question that is happening in so many school districts across New York State that are seeing the same trend. What is that trend? Eden intends to do a census in the course of the next few years so that we can get a handle on what that means. For right now, they are just big subjective questions as to what exactly does it mean for Eden. However, this is an interesting graph, because in 2007 and 8, which are essentially the same, that was the school year that the GEA started to be imposed on school districts. At the same time, the enrollments started to decrease. And you can see that it's a steady decrease. I mean, there's no big swings in this decrease. Overall, it's about 40 to 50 students a year, overall. And it spans mostly at the younger level. So to drill down on that, we have a graduating class of about 150 2 years ago. We have an incoming first grade class or kindergarten class of anywhere between 80 and 90. That's a significant difference. And Tom can talk more about that, which I'm not asking you to do it, but Tom could talk more about the fact that the fewer students you have, the less state aid you get. Okay, so while we might say, well, you're educating fewer students, it should cost you less, well, we're getting less money for each of the ones that we have. At the same time, some of our own expenditures don't change. Some of our own workload continues to increase. And so it costs more to run a smaller school district than it does to run a larger school district in terms of efficiency. We become less efficient as enrollment declines. Okay. Enrollment projections at elementary only up through grade 5. So could I use this wonderful thing that David gave you? Okay. So what you'll see down here on the bottom in the rows is kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And I felt it was enough to do kindergarten through fifth so that you could see a projection. Let's jump all the way over to 2015-16. And you can already see, is this a significant number, even though it only is 24? 24 is a significant trend. From fifth grade to fourth grade, it stays pretty much the same. But look at the huge difference between third and fourth. There's no bubble, because that trend continues to stay between 80 and 89. And up here, it stays between 106 and 104. Had I projected these numbers up above fifth grade, you'd see it 119, 120. If I went above that, you'd see it into the 120s, 130s. So every time you see this difference, it's significant to us. Let's go all the way back to 2012, 2013. Kindergarten doesn't look all that different. But I would say to you that 12 students in a district our size at fifth grade is significant because we're only looking at one grade. Now, when we start to make projections, we're going to say that this kindergarten class in 2012, as static projections, would become that kindergarten class. You can see we grew a little. Would become that kindergarten class. It's the same class as you travel on down. So you can see, as we keep on going, that this grade 3 here, the following year would become 89 at grade 4. That's an entire classroom, okay? So let's take a look at it up here. What does this chart mean to us as we start to see it? Kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. If you just take a look at 2012 and come all the way to 2015, 16, and even ignore the two in the middle, you can already see. Look at kindergarten, first and second grade. Here it only impacted kindergarten. What could you project for 16, 17? That this line is going to also be down. And so what will start to happen to us, not because of budget, but because of enrollment, is each year at the elementary level we will need one less classroom every single year. And it's not that we're depriving our students of anything, because they just don't exist. So while we have 5 fourth grades this year, there will be a point when we will only need 4 fourth grades. And you'll see in some upcoming slides how part of our planning for the budget next year is to only have 4 third grades for the same reason, whereas right now we have 5. Okay. Part of the budget planning process for next year is to eliminate 1 second grade classroom and 1 third grade classroom. Again, we're not depriving our students of anything, and for the most part, the class sizes stay very, very, very static. In eliminating a second grade classroom for next year, going from 5 classrooms to 4, our average class size will be between 19 and 20. Also eliminating a third grade classroom for next year, our class size will be anywhere from 20 to 23rd. These are projections. Granted, we could get students moving in, and this board has been wonderful in the past when they see that this doesn't happen, of coming together and saying, what do we need to do? And I've seen you do it in the last couple of years. So if I'm wrong, which could be, we may be coming back October, November and saying, all right, Sandy, you were wrong. All right, we need that 5th classroom. Right now, I'm not seeing a change in the trends. Okay.
Okay, so just kind of a recap, and we actually just wanted to talk about projections a little because that will impact, as I said, not just all financial, but other things go into the finances outside of just the financial picture, but also your student picture as well. So looking at where we have actually been. Okay, so for this current year, our budget this year is almost $4 million. That was a spending increase of $676,000 over the previous year, or 2.6% increase. The tax levy, though, what the taxpayers pay, went up 1.78%. And I, again, wanted to clarify or just bring up, like I did last time as well, what the taxpayers pay and that percentage of increase is not the same as the overall budget increase. Because when the overall budget is $16 million and the tax levy is $13 million, you could see if one goes up 1 point some percent, if you're getting others, revenues that you're seeing or changing your spending elsewhere, it's not going to be exactly the same from the tax levy as it is to the overall budget. That's why you're seeing the difference between 2.62 and 1.78. So what are we looking at for this coming year? I want to start off by saying, first of all, when we talk about the budget, I said this last year, I will say this probably every year until we have a surplus, which Lord only knows when that will actually be. When we talk about the budget, whenever there's a deficit, it is not an easy thing to talk about. First of all, nobody wants to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to be up here saying we have a deficit. But as I said last year, communities had one of two ways to handle the deficit, and in previous years, you guys have handled it the second way. The first way is to say, okay, there's not enough money to go around, I'm going to fight for my own individual program. That's the first way. And in my opinion, that seems to really be the setup that we've seen from the state of really dividing communities and figuring out how to make it that a very difficult process. But the second way is what I've seen in Eden is, again, people have come together. Again, last year we had about $2.5 million deficit last year, and I have to say that the community came together very well. And when we talk about people's jobs, it's not an easy thing to talk about. We know that. And for people sitting in this room that it affects, we know it's not easy. So please, we don't ever want to sound flippant when we talk about it. We don't ever want to say this is not a dire year as other years, because if it affects you personally, it is extremely personal. We get that. So even if we were short $5 and it affects someone personally, we get that. So please know as we go forward in that. So for this coming year, what we are proposing at this point is $27.2 million over the 26.3 from last year, an increase of $831,000, or about a 3% increase. Now, from that 3% increase, as I said, that increase isn't the same for the tax levy. So last time I went through an entire calculation of how the state has us calculate what the tax levy can actually be for the coming year. There's about 6 different slides, and I walked everyone through it and said, it's almost like following a recipe when baking. It's very little room for movement. They tell you, here's step A, step B, step C, you put everything in there, that tells you what your increase is, and without going through all 6 slides again, the last slide that we have from last time was this. The state says that we, Eden, are able to increase our tax levy at 2.21%. Or up to a maximum of $13,571,000. So that's where we ended at the last meeting.
So let's just take a moment here, because this has been one of those sticky wickets over the last couple of years. 2.21 is over 2%, but yet all we've been hearing for the last however many years the tax cap has been here is that a school district cannot go over 2% without going to a supermajority. But we're not asking anybody to go to a supermajority, so how can it say 2.21?
Because 2% is not 2%. And, I think I've said that ad nauseum, and I think most people now actually get that, but when the governor started the tax cap, again, it really sounds like we're beating it up on the governor. We don't mean to. However.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
But 2% never was 2%. There are exclusions that every district and municipality can actually have. So you'll almost never be at 2%. So for instance, if a district is to receive a pilot is, for a corporation, a payment in lieu of taxes. So they will pay a district a certain amount of money for a certain number of years. We don't have any of those, but some districts do. If the ERS retirement plan goes up over 2%, that overage can be an exclusion. We don't have any of that. But there are a lot of different things that go in as exclusions, which raise it 2% over 2%.
So it's been confusing at best.
It's been very confusing. He's tied it into CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is less than 2%. So he says it's either 2% or CPI, whichever's less, plus your exclusions. So last year, the CPI was 1.46. This year is 1.66. And then with your exclusions, that's why we've grown to 2.21.
So we are not asking the board to go to a supermajority. This is within our range, still staying under the tax levy, tax cap limit. Okay.
So when you take a look at it, I just want to point out, when you see that 2.21, it's actually 2.21956 if you're bringing it all the way out, but when they stop it, you normally think you would round up. They don't. It's 2.21 is what it shows on the website. Everyone, what you will see your taxes go up may not be exactly 2.21. This is a overall big pie picture of 13.571 is 2.21% increase, okay? So here you go, looking at the levy. The difference, this is what taxpayers will look at. So what every one of you are being asked for next year of going to 13.571 from 13.276. The difference, $294,000. And when you take a look at that, it's a lot of money to ask for taxpayers. I'm not going to say any different than that. But in a $26 million budget, 294 is not a high amount for growth. When you consider with contracts and healthcare, that eats up that whole amount. So just to let everyone know. Our revenues, on the flip side, our revenues have remained fairly static. So as you're seeing this, is for the most part, we're saying it's going to go up about $299,000.
The revenues are the money you bring in.
The money that we actually bring in. So, and most of that, quite honestly, at this point, is the increase from the tax levy. We have about 5,000 other, and we can't even look at building usage. We had that in the budget last year, so that's already, we left that about the same for this year. So our total revenue is going up about $299,000, or about $300,000. So even though, again, spending 1.1, about 3% increase, revenues about 1% increase, therein lies the difference, and that's why we're talking about our deficit. Before we talk deficit, we did this last year as well, and I wanted to bring this up before we say what do we need to do to close our budget gap. Even if you don't have a gap, let's say your budget's exactly on the money. Every single year, every district should be making some sort of adjustments based on program needs, because what you need next year is not going to be exactly the same as what you need this year. So you're really going to kind of change the pie a little bit. And you guys have heard me say this many times, the pie is what the pie is. So if your pie is basically a $26 million pie, but your needs change, well, now you just have to divvy the pie up differently. And what we called it last year is budget neutral adjustments. These are changes that are being recommended by the administrators, not because we're trying to close a deficit, but because we need to do things a little differently each year. So for instance, as we've mentioned in the past, our needs of students with higher needs is growing. So that's going to drive some of our changes in some of our staffing recommendations. The fact that in second and third grade we're not seeing as many students, that changes the needs. So we're recommending some staffing changes based on that. That isn't necessarily because of the deficit, but that's just because things are changing. So when we talk about this, as we look at, and I'll let Sandy start on the next slide, but the first slide is really because of that change in what the needs are for the district.
So when you take a look at this slide, when we talk about proposed budget neutral additions, we're actually taking, we did a number of different things. We said, what is it in terms of program that we're finding that we need to have to give excellent program to our students? And what we noticed during the school year this year, as our special needs students did increase, is that we were ending up with some of our classrooms having close to 45 to 50% of students with higher needs, and therefore you have higher needs to the teacher as well. It could be test read, it could be alternate site, it could be some behavioral needs. And so this board this year actually did already approve some aids to some classrooms in order to try to mitigate some of that need so that we could continue to give good instruction, excellent instruction to our students. What you're going to see in these first couple of budgets is proposed additions for, again, some classroom aids to create that kind of model where there might be a teacher and an aide in for half of the day. That aide in half of the day may be doing test read, could be doing some type of alternate sites, could be helping with some of the extra needs just simply because out of a classroom of 20 there may be 9 or 10 or more students that have special needs. You'll also see in here a sander and a salt truck. Ours has been what I call barnyarded for so many years, and given the winters that we're starting to have, to try to believe that it's going to continue to work is a fallacy, because it's not. And this year certainly took a big toll on all of our equipment. The guidance department chair, as we attempt to bring our guidance department in grades 7 through 12 up to speed with all the curricular and instructional changes that are occurring within New York State, we find that we need to have them physically embedded with all of the other department chairs that are curricular. For many, many years, education did not change in curriculum, and it is now. And so if we're going to say that we need our guidance department to be focusing on more academics, more curriculum, then we need to give them the means to do it. The Elementary Homework Club and Model UN were two extracurricular clubs that were cut from the budget next year. I have never been one to believe that just because something was cut one year doesn't mean that it can't be shifted in the following years. So the administrators got together and looked at every single club that was either kept last year for this year's budget or eliminated to take a look at what made sense to bring back for whatever the reasons, and these are two. Proposed budget neutral reductions, we had 2 retirements, Sheila Harris and Janice O'Brien at the elementary school, and we will miss them incredibly. But I would have to say to you that because 2 teachers retired, it is allowing us to right-size our second and third grade classrooms without cutting other teachers. And so while we will miss them incredibly, they have done a great service to some of our newer teachers and not having to let them go. And then we will be recommending a 0.33 FTE cut in our 7th through 12th grade science, which for the most part will not impact program, but will impact, for let's say, lab sizes. And our lab sizes are still small, in most cases under 12. In terms of additional reductions that our administrative team is making recommendations to the Board of Education on, that 3rd grade teacher, again, is not a person, it is the position, so we would be going from 5 classrooms to 4. But what that does at the elementary level is when you cut a classroom teacher, you also cut the related special areas, the art, the music, the PE, the computer, the library. Those are physical cuts to people who are currently teaching in school. Again, it's not a program cut because there are no students to go into those classrooms because we cut the classroom. So those related 2nd and 3rd grade specials, art, music, PE, and tech, add up to about a 0.33 FTE, but for each individual class, it's about a 0.03 FTE, or about 45 minutes a week.
So we still have those?
Absolutely. So for example, 3rd grade would need 45 minutes less a week for art and music for each of those, okay? But the rest of the kids are still going. There's about 45 minutes a week at elementary school. English is a 0.33 FTE cut. English is a secondary level, that is grades 7 through 12. 1 director of transportation, about 20 hours a week in our bus drivers, about 7.5 hours per week for bus attendants. Again, those are not necessarily due to budget, but they are due to our needs. We might not need to go to some of our private placements. We may not have students with special needs that need an attendant on the bus. That doesn't mean that in September we won't have someone new, but right now we don't have the need, so we're doing that. There is a recommendation for some, not all, of the sports, athletic sports to be cut at the JV level. What I would recommend is, starting in July or August, that we create a community-based research team to take a look at all of our sports offerings. Because as you saw in enrollment, our enrollment is falling enough that we cannot maintain adequate size teams. So this is a 1-year recommendation right now as a stopgap for JV level for not all sports, but for some. And then July, August, September, October, and into the fall to actually take a look at what our students want to take, what sports do we offer, are there some sports that we should eliminate based on enrollment or student interest. And it may not necessarily be the same. There may be some traditional sports where we don't have the kids here, but some newer sports where the kids are really very well involved.
And when are we going to pull these kids to find out?
I would like to do that starting in the summer and the fall and not have it tied to budget, because it's not tied to budget, it's tied to enrollment. And I don't want to confuse the issue. The issue basically is that we can't field all the teams that we have. Cutting JV is tied to budget. That doesn't mean that if we were to cut some sports next year, individual sports, the JV couldn't come back. It could possibly come back. But I would like to have that analysis done outside of the budget process. That is strictly based on enrollment. 3 reductions in special ed private placements. Again, either they're not coming to Eden or they've graduated. And then some general BOCES reductions, which is something that happens every year.
Okay, so what we're taking a look at, so you've seen the recommendations in terms of shoring up the budget deficit. So what is the budget deficit? So again, it's the spending versus the revenues. So the spending plan at this point, 27,228,000. The revenue is 25.69, or a difference of $1.5 million. That is the deficit. Now, if we take a look at what we ended up doing last year, we used $1.1 million in reserves. As I said,
And fund balance.
reserves and fund balance. Fund balance is actually part of a reserve, so that's all reserves. It gave me a little algebra, but that is what we used last year, so we're recommending if we do the same thing again this year, the difference of the 437,000 are what you saw in the previous slides in terms of
Tom,
recommendations.
it's really difficult to look at this without knowing what's in the retirement fund that we can't touch, what's in the sick days that we can't touch, how much is available that we can touch on here.
Okay, so for instance,
You haven't siphoned it out. Like it says $8 million, and like you said,
Correct.
everybody, oh, that's a lot of money. But
it is a lot of money, but
a lot of it is
it's totally restricted. So for
restricted.
instance,
How much is not restricted?
4% of our overall fund balance, so about $1 million is not restricted. That's it.
That's what we should be looking at.
The rest is all restricted funds. So for instance, when we take a look at the ERS, we have about $3 million in the ERS reserve. We cannot use $3 million this coming year because we don't have a $3 million ERS bill. So our bill is less. So we're saying.
I think basically, to keep things really simple, we can touch $1 million.
Yeah, no, I would say no more than that. In very,
that's a
very
nice way to
clean
put it.
terms, yeah. So that 437, again, this is not as bad as it was last year. And again, I don't want to sound flippant when I talk about this because it affects people. But we are not in a nearly as dire situation as we were last year, which is good for us.
Because they did the right thing last year.
Because, right, you guys made the right sizing when you needed to make the right sizing. But still, it's $430,000. It would be great to say on that previous slide there were no recommendations for any cuts, but unfortunately, we still find ourselves in a deficit situation. So looking at that, that's pretty much the end of the presentation.
So let me just jump in here. So there's lots of rallies going around New York State and lots of conversation and letters going up to the legislator. There is a hope that there will be some monies that are restored once the budget comes out on April 1st, and I'll be hopeful. What could that mean to Eden?
That could mean we don't need to do all those cuts.
Okay.
So, or some programs that we've needed to do and held off to do, we might be able to do a needed program.
Okay.
It depends on our
So we
accommodation thereof.
will most likely be coming back to you at that point. I'm going to be hopeful.
One of the things I do want to mention, there are a lot of informational sessions going on. There is a picket rally next Wednesday going on, and I wanted to clarify, as they're putting it together, what it is a rally for is to let the state know to please stop the funding cuts. It's not a picket of our district, so I mean, and I think everyone knows that, but it's always nice to point out, you know, the teachers union has been wonderful to deal with. They're very supportive of it. They are not picketing the district at all. They're letting the governor know, please stop the funding cuts to school districts. That will take place on Wednesday. So you will see picket signs out on Wednesday. That's why it's not
So
against
Wednesday,
this.
approximately 6:15 in the front of the school, but there are other meetings happening at the same time, and also a board meeting immediately following at 7.
So,
Can you tell them they're all welcome to support
Oh, my goodness, yes. What you'll see, thank you, Colleen, what you'll see in other school districts is there are other people who jump in. And so you are all welcome to jump in on that same rally, that same picket. This is not meant to be about the other issues that the governor is proposing. This is meant to be about funding, and that's what Wednesday is about. Is that right?
Yes, we can get money for the kids. And
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've spoken more than enough. So we're done. So we want to turn it over to everyone to hear your thoughts, your ideas. What we put together is the best plan. I want to say our administrative group, I think, has done yeoman's work. I've been in several districts. This district has been wonderful to see people come together, work together, and say, what can we all do? And it hasn't been infighting to say, my program's more important than another program. Everyone carefully thought of everything that was up there, so I've been extremely impressed with that. But again, we want to hear from everyone, because the more ideas you have, the better, the stronger the plan's actually going to be. So
This is open to anybody.
it is open to everyone. So when you come up, what we're going to do, I think, Mike, it's a limit of 2 minutes per person. We're looking for all constructive ideas. Again, I think we've done very good to say it can go either way, to say either fighting for my individual program or working together. And we set that ground rule last year, and I think it worked extremely well to have a positive, constructive, what are things we can actually do. Think about ideas not related to staff or ideas related to student programming. It could be anything. If possible, think the long-term solutions instead of quick one-time fixes. Sometimes we have to do quick one-time fixes, but if we can, on a long-term basis, change how we're doing something, it could save us a lot of money in the long run. And finally, we know it's not always easy to get up and speak, and not everyone's comfortable doing that. Some are very comfortable, and that's okay. But if you're not, that's also okay. You can drop off or have dropped off an envelope with your ideas. And if it's not today, you can deliver them to my office, to superintendent's office, because all ideas are definitely welcome. So, anything you want to say before it's turned over?
For these reductions, could we get, what the English .33, the amount is actually of savings? Not just that one, but all of them.
Yeah, we can get a breakout of how it all makes up. Yep.
The budget questions still being entertained?
We're starting, absolutely. Don, do you want to be the first
you
one?
can come up to the
You want to come up to the
microphone.
podium? And Barb Tomasulo, God love her, will be recording all of this, so all the questions.
Do you have a timer?
I can do it.
Okay,
And again, it is 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yep.
please.
Don Loretto, resident of town. In last year's budget, we had a deficit, yet we put over $1 million in reserve funds last
Correct.
August. Is that built into this budget too, a reserve fund?
The use,
contribution?
in terms of what? What was put in there? Yes.
Last year, is that also built into this year's budget?
Yes.
Are we going to have over $1 million reserve fund contribution?
We don't know at this point. We'll know at the end of the year, because as I mentioned, what happens is we cut off spending. This year we cut it off in December. And so at the end of the year, if we spend less than what we plan to, that's what we're able to put into the reserve. So we don't know that figure yet.
What I'm more interested in is what is the process? Because in my mind, the process was faulted that led us to have a 13th of our levy as a reserve. So we really didn't have, and I didn't write down, what was the budget deficit last year, $2.5 million? We didn't really have a $2.5 million deficit. We had a 1.5.
Because we had 1.1.
$1 million surplus.
You're right.
So do we know what the process was that led to that million or $1.1 million?
Absolutely.
And are we going to eliminate that so we don't have $1 million reserve donation in August? Do we know exactly what it is, or is it still unknown?
Okay, well, it's still unknown because we're only at March at this point. So what happens is, as I said, you don't know when you're creating the budget what you're going to end the next year at. And if you do things right, you're not going to end the year in a deficit situation. You're not allowed to end in a deficit situation. It's illegal, actually, to end in a deficit situation. So when you create a budget, you say, here's our spending plan. It's a $26 million budget. To spend exactly $26 million is almost impossible to do. But what we also wanted to do, we wanted to end with some money left over at the end to be able to help us with the reserves so we could actually use it in the budget process. Now, we could actually not cut spending off until March or April, and it would be less, absolutely, but it would make our budget process the next year all the harder. And so you're asking how we got to 1.1. We cut off the budget spending in December, which allowed us to underspend by $1 million. There's no guarantee in any way, shape, or form that we're going to underspend. If we have a special ed student come in, for instance, that could be about $150,000. And you have, sometimes you put a little extra hoping things won't happen. And if we don't get extra special ed kids, that allowed us to have a little bit extra at the end, which we did. And so...
You're cut off.
I'm cut off.
He's okay.
But it did allow us with a little extra. You don't know at the beginning of the year where you're gonna end the year, and there's just no way of knowing that before the year even starts.
No estimate, you don't have an estimate?
Before your starts of where you're gonna end your spending, you really, you wouldn't know that, because you don't know what bills are gonna come throughout the year. Water main breaks, you get a bill there, you can't predict.
I think a
before the
really
year
good
starts.
example of that this winter is we spent $15,000 on snow removal in November, and that was just on the snow removal company. The actual dollar amount from that storm far exceeded that in terms of damage to the district. I think another big piece in this one, in ending the year, having been pretty frugal, which is what we're attempting to do, is being able to put money into our capital reserve so that when we do try to do some maintenance items on the district, it doesn't have a tax impact. So it's intentional. You have to have a certain percentage that, just like you would in your operating budget at home, that you use just in case a crisis comes up. But we're trying to be incredibly frugal so that we can put the money where we need to after we've been able to go through the school year. But I agree, one student with high needs being transported could easily be $150,000 above and beyond all the rest.
No, but
So, I mean,
no.
my question is it intentional? And I think the superintendent answered it. It is intentional. They have a surplus at the end of the budget.
But,
The
and,
amount is always in question.
correct, but what I would say is this too, Don, what you've seen, and I think the board has also heard this as well, what we used to put in reserves was far more than $1 million. There were years we were putting about $2.5 million in the reserves. So what we've done is we're ending the year with less surplus. So, and that's
But is
number
the
one.
intent to overestimate expenses? Absolutely. Because if we because if we right.
Posted on the website is pretty inclusive, but it ends.
Right.
It ends at the year 11 to 12.
Mhm.
And if you could please update that with 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15. And if there is a projection, I mean, I understand you can't end your budget to.
Yeah, I wouldn't put a projection up there because we can't project. We can update it.
I want to be clear and fair.
Yep.
If I say it, that it is built into the budget to have a reserve.
No, and I think it's a really fair question, and I'm going to say it from a layperson in terms of not at the level that Tom understands it. In my home, I can always go into my credit account if I really need to do something. We don't have a credit account, so we have to overrate our expenses just in case there's a problem. That was a very good question. Thank you.
But let me also clarify as well. We don't go saying we don't plan on spending that money. We hope we're not going to spend the money. We make the best plan that if something were to happen, we're covered.
Because
But
you have to be covered.
You have to be covered because you can't go into deficit spending. But we don't say we want to end the year with $1 million, $2 million left over, because that's not our intent. Our intent is to make sure that if an emergency comes up, we're covered. That's it. We try. We make every effort. That's why we cut it off in December, to say what can we actually do to spend less than what we actually budgeted for. Because by mid-year, you start knowing if you're going to have extra students, and you're not. Okay, so let's cut off spending, and if we can actually, yeah, maybe we won't have to do that if there's no more foundation aid freeze. Maybe we won't have to do that if there's...
Maybe my question's better put to the board. Do we intend to grow to reserves each year for the next 5 years, 2 years, 10 years? Does the board have a specific plan to grow to reserves? Maybe it's better.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something about that. We just got back from the building, the capital building project, and we're looking at the last 10 years, we have done no maintenance on the building.
Well, we
I mean,
haven't
look-
done no maintenance, but we've done no big maintenance.
Nothing at all. And we haven't put any money into the building, the capital fund.
We've put some, not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not enough.
And the money that
Enough.
we need to just maintain the buildings is very, we don't have it. I mean, look at the ceilings in here. and the infrastructure.
$1 million. I mean, in their
What do you mean?
capital reserve last
For last August, we put $500,000.
Great.
1.5
But now, was it restricted that we had to put in?
capital.
Well, it's in the capital fund, and we made the recommendation last year that as we
Because
were
we're
looking towards a
beginning a
capital
capital
project, it made sense to build that one up. And that was by intent of putting in specifically into that reserve. So
And-
what happens is with the capital reserve, you want to have as little tax impact on taxpayers in a capital project. So that was a very decided.
It was a
And
strategic.
Don, I think it's because we've been delinquent in that area for a long time. So yes, I personally, if you want to know my opinion on it, I will put the money into the capital. I just sat in the meeting and looked at all the delinquencies and the GLP and just the bus garage alone. So,
I just think it's a fair question for the levy.
Absolutely.
payers of the levy.
Well, our reserves are going down, though, not up. So if you take a look, it now is in a downward trend. So we're not putting more in, it's actually going downwards now. So I do need to point that out.
That's a projection.
Yes.
No, 14, 15
Well, it's a
went down.
projection.
That's this year. So it actually went down.
Well, we don't know what the reserve amount that we're going to put in is, like I asked. And we don't know if that's accurate yet.
The 14, but the 14, 15 is from August.
Is accurate.
That is accurate,
Future ones are just projections if you don't know.
if we haven't changed. But
I
we,
guess the real question is to the board, do we intend to keep the capital reserve or any reserve, because the board decides where the reserve money is going to be put. If we intend to have a reserve and how much it is and how you're going to accommodate it for us. I mean, it has to be in the budget process somewhere.
and it is.
I
Go
think,
ahead.
I think you
I'm
have
good.
to.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is, 2 minutes has grown into 10 minutes, so let's move on.
And
I'm not
I
gonna
think
be
every
here all
year
night.
is different. So am I going to support the building? Yeah.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
I would like to know how it's possible, I need Lori Sandel. I would like to know how it's possible to release a teacher in English and global that is for our students to have a New York State credit card, and a teacher that has done miracles with our children behind us, and she's going to be released. I'd like to know why.
You're talking about Mrs. Wilhelm, is what you're saying. She's not being released, she's being reduced as of right now, which I would agree with you. I had her as a teacher. She is by far one of the best teachers we have in this district. And what I'll say to you is, we're going to work, we're going to find out what the state's going to bring back to us, and that would be my recommendation, once we figure out what the money is coming back from Albany, that 18,000, the .33 FTE is restored. So till we know what we're getting, that's going to remain there. But I can assure you that once we figure out where this money's coming from, or the money that we're going to be getting from Albany, that'll be the first place I'll be putting it back into, or that I would be in support of putting it back into.
I mean, is there a definite, is she staying or is she going?
Mike just said.
Well,
it's-
she's staying, but as of right now, she's a .33 reduction. So she's not going to be gone. She'll still be in this building, but she is being reduced at this time.
So, addressing the board this morning and with parents that are still here, how can we raise more money with the situation that the board is in with this school? How do parents and families come together?
You call your
So
senator.
you come Wednesday night.
And
You
write to
come
your
to
senator.
their rally. You call your senator, Senator Galvin, who's been to this district, who understands what we're going through.
David DiPietro.
David DiPietro,
And-
another
and-
person.
And write to your other senators. One of the parents has a whole list of them on our website. Write a page, copy it, and send it out to every one of them, even if they're not in the Eden or Erie County, if they're in, Warsaw County or wherever. Send it out, because they affect us.
They can increase the money that comes to us. They've tied our hands. They've absolutely tied our hands. Yeah.
And you share all
Yeah.
the parents here and the children
Yeah.
understand too. It's just very mind-boggling when you hear something like that, that a teacher who has gone over and beyond.
She's not the first one. We've lost a lot of really great teachers
Mrs. Boster.
lately.
And I think it's important for the audience to recognize that the state of New York creates laws on how teachers are released for budgets. It is the least senior that goes first. So we don't pick and choose whom. It's the least senior in terms of whichever certification or tenure area. So in English, that is Mrs. Wilhelm. In social studies, it is a particular person. And so that's why you may have heard me earlier say that as sad as we are about Sheila Harris and Janice O'Brien retiring, they've saved 2 other elementary teachers from being cut. Otherwise, you would have seen a 2.0 up there for 2 other teachers as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's still on the Wilhelm issue, but I figured I should get 2 minutes too.
Your name?
Huh? Oh, Amanda Kraus. I was just wondering with your budget increases, why then? Because your money limit that you had before is now increased. So then why are teachers getting reduced in pay? Like that they won't be able to stay here. You can't like reduce their pay to have a teacher be able to stay. Like they won't be able to live off that. And I don't understand like why, if your budget is increasing, why your money is like towards the teachers are decreasing.
Fair question. In a nutshell, the reason why is our expenses are rising more than what our revenues are. And so we have contractual expenses we're obligated to pay no matter what. And they're rising too fast for our revenues.
So each person that you keep each year costs more each year. And that makes sense. The more experience that someone has, the more money they should make. But the more money that someone makes, the more expenses go with it in terms of health insurance, Social Security. So the more experienced your teachers are in a school district, each year those expenses will go up.
What's a good ballpark on the annual increase in expenses that we're having to deal with?
Per person
Per
or
person?
per district?
No, just across the board per district.
I guess I'm not.
Is it like 10% or something that expenses are going up
We had 3.
that we have no control
We
over?
had 3.
As an overall whole, you're going to see salaries going up anywhere about 2.5, 3%. Healthcare is going up 3%. So it just depends on what category you're actually looking at.
And
Right.
Amanda,
Our
these
BOCES is
are,
going up more than 10%.
these expenses are in contracts that we're obligated to pay increases in everybody else's salary. The board doesn't get to, I mean, we
Did
get
that
to have
answer-
them.
Did that answer your question, though?
In a way, but I understand what tenure is and how like you get like locked in your job for how long you are here and it goes by seniority, but I feel like that the board should decide against that and go on more so of the quality of teaching, because I know personally that like Ms. Wilhelm, like, I don't know, like helps everyone. And
You're doing fine.
You're doing good.
I don't know, but like for like a quality of a teacher, like she should be the one to stay. And,
So there is a law, so we can't break the law, okay? But that doesn't mean that you can't write letters, all right? And that's exactly what we've been talking about today, is you can write to your legislators, because if you as a student feel that current laws in New York State or in state ed are not fair to you, there's actually 2 lawsuits across the country that are about the same thing. It's about tenure. It's the last one who comes is the first one who goes, and that's what you're saying, is that that's what you don't agree with.
yeah, and that like all of us are here for Ms. Wilhelm today, and I don't like think that it's fair for you guys to like decide.
Amanda, we're not deciding. Somebody already decided it for us. It's in the contract.
No, but let's
We do decide.
but
We do
let's
decide.
No.
but let's come away from that for a minute. The best thing that you can do is to take your sadness and your emotion, put it down in writing, and write to Senator Gallivan, write to the governor, write to BTHO, because they can restore money to schools. That's what they can do. This district has lost $23 million in that type of revenue since 2008. You can make a difference, and everybody sitting here can make a difference.
I'd just
Okay?
like you guys to maybe try to reconsider and figure out a different way to redistribute the money to a way to keep the teachers that are really important.
And nothing's been decided. These are just proposals on the table.
All I have to say.
I'll go to the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Good morning, Colleen Codd, President of ETA. Kids, we have your back. We understand this. I want to just clarify what tenure is all about. It isn't a job guarantee. We need to educate everybody as to what it is. It's due process. So if you are going to get rid of a teacher, we have a process as to how that happens. So please understand that. Like, Sue Wilhelm's awesome. but everybody's being impacted, which is why we are holding this educational rally on Wednesday. Governor Cuomo is holding the schools hostage. He is not releasing financial money unless they follow his educational reforms. And you are all being impacted by it. It's horrible, it's horrendous. Please come out Wednesday. We are all in this together. So I feel for you. I do. It will be at 6:15. We just need to send the message to Gallivan and DPH. We got to be in this together.
Where will it be at 6:15?
It's going to be here at the high school. We're going to walk out in front. We just didn't have time to switch venues to Main Street, which would have been more public. But you have seen these rallies all over the state. My husband's out of a job, okay? He's been teaching 18 years and his program's been completely cut. It's impacting everybody. So I feel it. It's horrible.
Thank you.
My name's Rodney Pierce, and I live here in Wheaton. I want to make some comments that really don't have so much to do with Governor Cuomo or anything. It's things that I think we could do between now and 2020 that would help us regardless of what is going on at the state level. And I don't think that my comment's going to be original with me. It's something some of us have talked about many times before. I've lived in the town of Eden since 1971. I have observed Eden's growth. And I can tell you that the number of houses in Eden are significantly greater in number than they were when we moved here. Not only are they greater in number, they're greater in size. There are more expensive houses than that Eden had when I first came to Eden in 1971. Size of a house is related to taxes that come on a house. The amenities in a house, the size of the property, all relate to taxes. In that sense, the houses that are in Eden now in 2014-15 are more expensive related to the tax level than they were when I came in 1971. There is something about Eden that is unique and beautiful and wonderful, and we've thought, and everybody talks about it, what a lovely little community it is, how nice it is that it's kind of like walking back to the 1950s and this sort of nice thought. But the fact is there is room for growth in Eden. And it's something that I think that now, when things are reaching the consequence that they are, that perhaps the school board and the town board need to come together. Any town that loses its school has lost its identity, practically. That is even true if a town loses its post office. It also loses its identity. And we can point to towns that are around us very close, that have, or villages or hamlets that have had that type of thing happen to them. It's a disaster. So I think if we, between now and the next 5 years, would start to do some cooperative thinking to say, how can Eden grow? How can Eden grow by numbers of persons coming into town, which would increase our tax base? How can Eden grow by industry, which comes into the town, which would increase our tax base? We have been laid back a little bit on the comfort that, well, this is an agricultural town, so we can't touch certain things. But I think some very good constructive thinking could find out that there is space for a housing development to come into this town. Districts like Frontier, which you've mentioned, that are in terrible shape right now, and they've grown and grown and grown. They don't have much room to grow anymore. But Eden does have
Absolutely.
room. So I would like to see some cooperative thinking and innovative thinking going in this line, because I think it will behoove us regardless of what the government does.
Great job.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Hale. I'm a 9th grade student here at Eden. In your presentation, I saw that up on the board you had Model UN.
For an add-on for next year.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was going to be funded or if it was being considered for being funded. But I just wanted to reiterate that if we were to fund the club, it could be funded for under $1,000. It follows our curriculum, which would be that the research and evidence-based, clear and understandable, and consistent consistent, aligned with college and career expectations, based on rigorous content and the application of higher order thinking skills, and informed by other top performing countries to prepare all students for success in our global economy and society. Earlier this year, we went to a meeting called CIMUN in Chicago. It was the Chicago International Law of the United Nations. We brought back an award that I myself brought back, which was that I brought back, which was the most outstanding delegate. That was out of 8,000 students. It brought together. It was international, so it was all around the globe. But Model UN is basically it's extremely important for me and for everyone else. I had a presentation. It was a PowerPoint, but the person that my counterpart couldn't make it to show you. But I don't have any visuals. But we went and we saw monuments in Chicago. We stayed for like 4 days. We stayed in a hotel. It was like we put ourselves in places of people, and it's like when we think about in one of the points it says that it's based on rigorous content and application of higher order thinking skills. That's exactly what it is. We're higher order thinking. We think outside of the box. We put ourselves in places that other people cannot be in. I was the third vice premier of China. I clearly don't look like the third vice premier of China. I always put myself in that place like I was running the actual country. So it's an important after school activity. I know I was extremely happy to see that it was being considered on the board, but my proposal is just asking if we could fund the club. It would be able to be funded for $100,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor.
It is being funded.
It's proposal to be funded, yes, if the board adopts it.
And what grade are you in?
9.
Well, you're one of the best public speakers I've ever seen.
So wait. So she brushed over it really fast, but could you talk about the award that you won?
Oh, yeah. It was, I actually have it with me.
Why don't you show us? Sure. It's your 15 seconds of fame. You can't have 15 minutes.
This is the fancy triangular glass award.
Don't drop it.
But what it looks like is nothing for what it means. When we went there, we spent 4 days of 14-hour conferences. We got almost 2 hours of sleep at night. And it doesn't sound like fun. You get 2 hours of sleep and then you go and basically do schoolwork when you're on a break. But we stood in these rooms with over 100 people. Some of us had less, some of us had more. And we debated on world issues, mine was about islands in the South China Sea and energy uses with Asia, which is not something that we learn in global or geography or anything. It's something that we go out and research, which was 60 hours worth of research. We have to write papers, we have to do, when I say it's higher order thinking, it really is. It's we are real politicians and real diplomats sitting in rooms, racking our brains about how to make this world better. So when we sat in that award ceremony, and my name, not my name, but third vice premier of China was called for the most outstanding delegate award, that was when I stood up in front of 8,000 people when everyone clapped for me. That was extremely exciting. More people got awards, but it's just being that one person that stood out, that's when I knew this club was extremely important.
It's nice. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Don't drop it.
Good morning, Sue.
Good morning, Sue.
Parent, teacher, musical producer. So thinking outside the box, and Tom, I'm going to really address this to you. Last year, with the musical cuts, we were charged with creating a Music Boosters Club, a 501(c) not-for-profit, to try to help fund music in the district. And I'm addressing this too because I know we've had this conversation before. Parents are asked to think outside the box. We have a lot of parents here. Is there a 501(c) that we could, as a community, establish to help with funding of the school?
Here, let me talk a little bit about my experience in another district. I worked in Tonawanda before here, and you and I have spoken about this, but no one else here has really heard a lot about that. A 501c3 is a separate entity than the school, and there is an arm's length operation. So the school
It just means a not-for-profit.
right, a 501c3 is a not-for-profit, but also the school cannot be part of that 501c3 because of what our charge is. It has to be a totally separate entity. However, that being said, in Tonawanda, when they found themselves very similar to us in terms of being in a situation of not being able to fund everything they wanted to, the community members came together and said, we want to form a 501c3 to raise money for things that we can't afford through the budget. So what they wanted to do is create a general boosters program. So it wasn't music, it wasn't sports, it wasn't anything specific. And so that group can say each year, here's what's important to us for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and then we want to donate it back to the school district. So if it's lights outside, if it's a music room, whatever the case may be. So as a whole, that community came together and they actually formed that not-for-profit foundation is what it was, of which I still sit on that foundation, which I know you know.
Springville has one.
And I believe Clarence, when they were in dire straits, was it last budget year, didn't they also form more of a community-based?
Williamsville has one.
So it's something we could, so you're
Absolutely.
asking
But the community has to. The school cannot.
Right.
It has to be community driven. Yep, absolutely.
Thinking outside the box,
It is.
if our community wants to do something to help the school.
Absolutely.
We'll take any money you want to give us.
Right, there could be a group of people who would get together.
Yes, you could.
Yes.
Form this, just like the sports boosters, just like we're trying to do with the music, more for general education.
Correct. If, as a foundation, you can raise money for what you want. The board then would accept or not accept the funds that you actually wanted to. So say, for instance, if you wanted to fund a position, you can actually say, we want to provide funding for a position. The board could say yes or no. Then that money would be set aside for what the purpose was that it was intended to be funded for.
So the reason I wanted to speak today is I wanted to make sure that people know that there
That's great.
is other options out there besides depending on Albany.
Absolutely.
We want Albany to fund
No,
our
it's true.
schools.
We do.
But we also want to help ourselves so that we're not
Yes.
always dependent on raising taxes or what governor's going to give us. We want to be able to say, we want Mrs. Wilhelm, we're going to fundraise for Mrs.
It's a
Wilhelm.
community coming together. Absolutely.
Thank you for the information.
Hey, Tom, on that note,
On the
if we
foundation?
did that community fundraiser, would it affect our state aid in any way?
No. No, because it would be considered an additional revenue source, and it's an organization outside of the school.
Don't we already have, with the community foundation that we have?
But that's for the community,
That's not.
But it's very similar.
It's similar.
It's similar. So you have an Eden Community Foundation that does exactly the same things within the community. This would be specific to the school. So it's the same concept, though, Mike, you're right.
Mrs. Angelo, if there are community members that would like more information on what we've been going through with the music boosters to get established, I'd be more than happy to talk to somebody about some of the processes and some of the things we've learned. I think it's a really good option for us and a worthwhile thing to look at. But like you said, it's separate from the school, so it has to be community-based.
Karen?
Hello, my name is Karen Hall. I'm the parent of 2 children in the district. And some things that I've certainly talked about over the years, and I recently joined Sue and a group of people on the music and arts booster. So I want to continue to stress the importance of music in our district. I think we're looking at creative thinking and creativity in school, and that's one place where a lot of students thrive and really get a lot of enjoyment from that part of school, and it's important to keep it there and maintain it, especially lots of talk about career and technical ready as they go out into the workforce or college, and creative thinking is a very, very important part of that, and so I feel that music and art needs to maintain and be strong here in the district. And the couple of other things, just support for enrichment, gifted, talented. I know that position was lost last year. All students, no matter what level, academic level they are at, need assistance, and I think no matter where they are. And so these students also have academic needs. Classroom size, I know I understand the reduction in enrollment, understand that makes sense as the kids are moving forward. But if we're going to differentiate within each of the classrooms, I think it's important to keep the classroom sizes, as you're certainly talking about and showing, but keeping classroom sizes small so that the teachers are better able to do that. And then just one thing that I've been working on a lot is this agriculture in the district. We have a strong agricultural community here in Eden, and so we've done a lot of, this is sort of thinking outside the box, but a group of us within the district and community volunteers working to bring, I see it, it's so positive and such a wonderful thing that I see happening kindergarten through 12th grade. And one example, I think Mary Bango, she was here, but not, next week she and I are working with kindergarten through 2nd grades. We're talking about sheep and the production of wool. So all of those classrooms are going to have a 45-minute demonstration on the importance of that. Not my expertise, but I'm learning.
You're not bringing sheep in, are you?
Of course she is.
They are.
Of course she is.
They are.
Shh, don't tell them that.
Okay.
There you are. So helping that and bringing that to the teachers.
We've been trying to keep that quiet from Tom.
Dave, for our buildings and grounds crew, we may need a little extra help. Exactly.
So that part and everything, you know, the gardens, the raised beds, the 4th grade, and beekeeping, and so there's a lot of different aspects coming together on that. So thank you. And
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
So just to piggyback, I don't want you to stop clapping for her. I can speak after if you want. Okay. Is the Ag in the Classroom has been an incredibly successful committee. I met with Senator Gallivan last week, who is actually pulling together the Wyoming County Co-op and the Erie Co-op to see if we can't be doing the same type of thing, since there's so much funding that goes into Wyoming County. And so that's really exciting. And then on top of that, too, is there are a number of committee members who are going to be creating raised beds to grow something with a quick turnaround, lettuce, spinach, I'm not sure what it is, at the elementary school this year. And Karen is involved, and Paul Zittle's involved, and 4-H is involved, so it's just been and Tech is involved, so it's been just a really wonderful opportunity. Okay.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Hello.
What is your name?
My name is Abby Young, and I'm a senior at Eden. But I also have a message from Mrs. Nicastro, who is a teacher and our teacher at our school, but she's at a technology conference this morning in Buffalo, and she asked me to relay this message for her. Having the opportunity to work with Susan Wilhelm has made me a better teacher. She makes connections with students that go beyond the lesson. She alone has helped students find their way to graduation when otherwise they would have dropped out or given up. Susan led her efforts and creatively to every district, endeavored not limited to Embers, Readers Response, or the making up new curriculums for everybody. She makes herself available to Eden learners around the clock, whether she resets the Apex at midnight or helps a research paper during dinner hour. It is imperative for the reign of this governor that we come together and support education in every way, making cuts to programming weakness, a school district whereby weakening a community. And she says, please do not reduce Susan Wilhelm's hours, because she's an asset to our district. And I have something to say off of that. What Mrs. Nicastro said was true, and Mrs. Wilhelm, I thought about the learning lab that recently.
Do your cell phone? Mm-hmm.
Do
you have another one in your pocket?
Yeah, she does. Wow, there's technology for you.
Which was a very helpful thing, and I'm down there during my study halls, and there's a couple seniors that have been struggling to graduate, and they're down there every day with her, and she's down there every day getting them to write their research papers, getting them to finish their Apex, getting them to even come to school on time. Like, she's there for them to push them to get to school and finish what they have to do, because she wants nothing but the best for us. and she, I don't really know how else to say it. She just like cares a lot about everybody, and it's like sad to hear that she is even like up to reduce her hours. I know the tenure and stuff like that, but like she like cares like wholeheartedly way more than I think anybody ever could care about a student.
So what I've heard you and Amanda talk about is seniority. So it's not tenure, you're talking about seniority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the senior, I like agree with what Amanda said about the seniority, how I think that okay, I'm just gonna say my opinion. I think that the tenure is a little crazy because teachers that have been working for 10 years have been working for 10 years, but the new teachers that have been coming in have fresh ideas, fresh knowledge, fresh things to teach, fresh ways to teach students and stuff like that. Like they have not better, but new ideas that maybe could work out better than the old ideas. So I just think that she should definitely, I don't know, I'm just rambling now.
Thank you for coming up.
Yeah, and I also have another question. When I was under the impression that students that are not inside our district are not allowed to attend our school, like say a Hamburg student would like to come to Eden, why is that? Why can't they pay the school taxes to come to Eden if they choose to come to Eden?
So there are some school districts that have open enrollment to students from other districts, and there are some school districts that don't. But there are laws that are wrapped around having students come from other districts. So a few years back, when school boards started looking at their policies, what they realized is that it was impossible to charge a student the actual cost for coming. And so it actually costs us more to educate students than what we actually can charge. And so bringing... Some school districts will do it because their numbers are in such a way that it actually works to their advantage. So let me give you an example from a secondary level, so grades 9 through 12. If I have 33 students that want to take a class, I need to push 2 classes to get 32 kids. So I end up with 16 and 16. That becomes a very expensive venture. We'd be better off to have 20 and 20. So in some cases, in some districts, it's worth it for them to bring students in and boost their student numbers so that their class sizes are less expensive per kid. Okay? Okay. Guess. Okay. Thank you. Morning, Jen.
Hi. My name is Jen Marshall. I'm a parent in the district, and I am also a member of the PTA. Before my young people leave, I would just like to make one statement. With parent permission, it's great to see all these young faces here. To me, I'm so sorry.
All of you.
Yeah, she wants to talk to all the students.
I know you want to go. I just want to say one thing. It's great to see all of you in the crowd concerned about your school. It's wonderful to see. And my suggestion to you, with your parents' permission, there is these names that have been up here, contact your representatives. I don't know how old you are. You may not be old enough to go, but that doesn't mean that with your parents' permission, you're not old enough. You're definitely old enough to write a letter to one of your representatives. It doesn't matter that you can't vote. The laws that are being put into place by these adults have a direct impact on you. So there are the names are up there. I do have packets with me. These are packets that the Eden PTA and the Eden Teachers Association put together. These are letters that the New York State PTA wrote about the current issues in education. There is a date for the rally, there's an advocacy alert, and there's names on the back. These are all the representatives. The first 3 are the governor and the 2 state representatives that directly impact you. You can also friend Mr. DiPietro and Mr. Galligan on Facebook. I send Mr. DiPietro messages all the time.
From either phone that you have on you.
So again, I'm going to strongly encourage you to ask your parents first. Don't say Mrs. Horchel said to you. I'm just saying, it's definitely an option to you, and they will listen. If anybody needs packets, I have them. Yes, parents in here to look packets.
Okay, we're at about 12 o'clock. Is there anyone else who wanted to get up and make a comment?
Don does.
Yep. Mr. Johnson?
Don, you better call him back in.
Don Johnson, parent, taxpayer, resident. I noticed from 2007, 2008, enrollment went down.
Can you go to that slide?
Roughly 40%, you say?
I don't know the percentage, but dramatic enough.
Plus or minus. What has the amount of staffing done? Because at the last forum, from what I understood, 75% of costs are employee costs. I'm glad you put that back up there. Has staffing gone down any in that?
Sure. So we're a service-related industry. So in a service-related industry, our costs are going to go towards service, not toward things. And so our costs, whether it's 75, 80, whatever it will be, is definitely going to be about people. When we start to take a look at the staff in the district, what you will immediately see is that at one point, there were 5 or 6 classrooms at the primary school. We're now down to 4. So yes, there have been staffing cuts, and you're starting to see that even more so. This year, we're cutting a 2nd grade classroom. Next year, we're cutting a 3rd grade classroom. If nothing changes in enrollment, the following year, a 4th grade. The following year after that. Thank you, Nicole. Could you do this? Nicole. You're being a great assistant. Could you put those out there? Yes. Thanks. Sorry, 5th grade. And then we'll start to see what happens as we come up the line. But the same thing is happening at the secondary level, and that's what you're hearing the students talk about. So we are under state education laws that the last person in as a teacher is the first person to go, so the least senior. So the emotion and the impact that you're seeing is the least senior English teacher. And it will start to fall through again into the least senior social studies, the least senior math. And this is just exactly what will continue to happen as enrollment declines, because we don't need as many teachers over time. Now, the year I came, we did do a big impact on teachers, and we somewhat right-sized that year. We changed our scheduling from block to traditional, knowing 2 things: that in a traditional schedule that we have smaller blocks that we can fit better, knowing that we were declining our enrollment as well. But as time goes by, what you saw here today will continue to happen, is because we will, each year that we have fewer students over time, 40 does not make for 1 teacher cut, okay, it takes more than 40 kids. But over time, you will start to see me making recommendations that are hard recommendations. But that's exactly what's happening.
I would think that we want to do it through more of an attrition.
I do too.
I know that's,
and that's happening this year. No, but it's happening this year, which is wonderful. So you have 2 senior, wonderful teachers retiring, but it's saving 2 other teachers. So I agree with you about attrition.
my fear within New York State is our taxes are so high that we're driving people out of the state. And I really want those kids to hang out.
We like them to hang out longer, too.
They're going to be the ones that are going to have to move somewhere else.
I know.
And, I mean, it's economic reality that where's a business or a person going to want to go where they can get a job, make a living, or a business make a profit, and pay out as little as we can. The other thing that the other thing I wanted to touch on was the capital project. What is going to be the economic impact after the state pays their share? I know each town, city, village, whatever, the state reimburses you a certain percent.
We're about 80% right now.
80%, so you're going to have 20% cost on whatever you decide.
Let me take it.
That capital improvement, cost is, and with other expenses. And I agree with Barb, we haven't done nothing. The schools are looking kind of rough, but before we do wish list type items, don't take that the wrong way. We should try to keep our economic house in order.
So let me jump in, and Tom's chomping to come before me, but he's got to wait. we are working on the number for a capital project that would have a zero tax impact. That takes a little bit of work, and we're not there yet, but Tom has been working on that all week to try to get to those numbers. We don't have that number just yet. And then it will be up to the board to determine what it believes the community would want or can handle in terms of a tax impact above or beyond that number. The other thing that we have turned around is trying, and this answers to some extent Mr. Loretto, is smart school districts put $100,000 or $200,000 each year into capital outlay projects, so that each year they're doing some maintenance, and it's not considered big, but it's big enough to make an impact on us. Our district has not put that money aside. It hasn't had the money to put it aside. So in our second year, and I give Tom a lot of credit, and the Board of Education, we're attempting to switch the way we spend and how we save our money and where we put our money so that it has less of an impact on the taxpayers. So when you see a recommendation for $250,000 or $300,000 to go into a capital reserve, that then means that it's less of an impact on you as a taxpayer. What I would love to see is Eden Central School District having $2 million in their capital reserve. And we said that last year at one of our board meetings, because then I can have a major, I can have a zero tax impact on residents with a major project. We're not there. We can't do that.
Well,
sure.
Oh, can I just touch on
See,
that
I
one
told you
too?
it was chopping. I knew it.
One of the things I would say with a capital project is, again, we mentioned that right now we're at about 80% reimbursement rate from the state. That changes every year, so that it'll fluctuate a little bit. One thing I would advise everyone and caution everyone on, we've mentioned a couple times of a tax neutral project. I think we need to be very careful when we say a tax neutral project, because people expect it will not cost them anything. And when we go on record and saying it won't cost you anything, if it ends up costing people something, they will be back here and saying, wait a minute, you said tax neutral. I would be very cautious of really ever going out and saying it will be tax neutral. We could say we're aiming for, but to say it will be is very dangerous. That's just my...
But we are working on what that number...
We are working on what
be.
That target would be. Now, the 20% that we have left over really wouldn't cost us 20% because you have things like reserves and stuff like that. So if you structure your debt service in the best, most advantageous way, that 20% may not cost us 20%. It may not be tax neutral, but it also won't be 20% as well. So that's what we're trying to work on right now.
Last thing. On the future budget for next year, how much is figured in there and needs to be figured in there for the school bus situation? And is that being looked at,
absolutely,
with a fine-tooth comb?
Absolutely. Yes. This board, I will give them a lot of kudos, have spent months looking at the busing situation, what we're actually looking at not only to get through this year, stabilize next year, and look at a long-term plan. At the last meeting, the board had said we're looking at a 7 and 9 year replacement plan for our buses, and now we're starting to, and actually we'll go out next year at beginning that replacement schedule. So next year at this point, we're looking at purchasing 3 buses, leasing 3 buses. We're going to see how we can structure that the best way possible, that we're keeping the dollar level consistent over the year. So we're looking at about a $450,000 level. Right now, we have the money in our capital reserve to take out $450,000 to pay for the buses for next year. How much? $450,000. So there would be no general fund impact next year on taxpayers for the buses.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We appreciate it.
I have one more question.
As board member, absolutely.
I have a question for Kelly LaRosa.
Uh-oh. Pay attention, Kelly.
And how many languages do we have here in Eden? And what is for our size district, which we're at about 1,500?
A little under.
A little under.
1460.
How many languages do they usually have? Five languages?
Yeah. And it just depends on how they're structured as well. Some school districts can offer their language from kindergarten on up, Other districts may not offer a second language until 11th or 12th grade. One other committee that we've talked about in board meetings that will be starting up this coming summer and fall is a community-based committee to take a look at our foreign languages based on enrollment. Because we have to look down the line, not where we are now, but where we predict to be in 18 or 19. And in the year 18 or 19, we really won't have enough students to even put them in 3 different languages. So we will be asking our parents to tell us what foreign languages, world languages, right, Kel? So what they're now calling them world languages, they want us to be offering, so that we're not sitting up here trying to make that decision for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's just a little bit after 12. We appreciate your
Good job.
patience. Please feel free to call, email, text, write your governor, write your elected official.
And come Wednesday night.
Yes.